What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are having a great day. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, Gunpla, all that good stuff. I am your host, Steven, and joining me as always is the Gundam Maniac, Adam Blue. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing good. Happy to be here. I'm interested in what Gunpla lessons you've learned, as the title says, because I actually have been just working on this one kit recently. So um, I'm always looking for newer tips. Because every time I build something, I feel like I want to improve somehow.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that in the last several months, I've definitely learned a lot that, I'm going back and looking at some of my old videos and I'm like, oh, that's what I did wrong. I'm such a
Oh, cool.
fool.
Yeah, going back and looking at old videos. Oh my god, embarrassing. Well, I'm talking about
Yeah,
me, but
I'm
yeah.
gonna put together my own cringe compilation. But yeah,
Cringe
before we hop
compilation.
into it, I do want to show off this sweet merch from
Oh, yeah.
the Zionic Shadow. This is so freaking sweet, and we've got a little
Yep.
sponsored build going on. We're almost done putting together the snap build of our
Ooh.
Bondoc. Or do you say Bond Doc or Bound Doc?
Okay, I would say bound dog only because you explained it as like a bound dog.
And that was explained to me by someone else. It goes back
Okay.
to that whole conversation you and I had about Gundam disinformation.
Yeah.
And,
No,
we
that
all just repeat the same thing that is told to us by someone else.
yeah, but I think it makes sense because a lot of times with these weird n Tomino names of things, like, I think that, it works. And real quick to show off mine, this is how far I've gotten so far on
Oh,
the
yes.
Red Rider. Not too
Also,
far because I realized the head. You know how with these Hades exam types or whatever, like, there's multiple options?
yep,
This technically has, like, 4, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 6 ways of doing it because it could be different eye, different visor, and then the colors. And so I went through and I was, like, making my own variation and, like, testing different variations out that I think looks cool. It's like
that's pretty
a
sweet.
non-visor look, but a certain set of eyes, and
Hmm.
I thought that was a pretty interesting. I'm gonna have to detail that in my, video about it.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of your videos, you dropped a video this morning on the Gundam Ensemble
Yeah.
Nightingale, which, if you guys haven't checked that out, check that out after the stream. There's links below in the description, as well as a link in the description to the poll that we've got going. There's still some time left to vote
Oh,
on
yeah.
what we are going to do with this bound doc is because whenever I get a sponsored build from Zionic Shadow and Zig New York, I take that very seriously, and so
Oh,
this is one
yeah.
that I want to try and put as much fancy stuff into. Maybe I'll even try to incorporate this bad boy, which I bought
Oh,
on Amazon the other day.
that is a good idea.
Yeah.
Wait,
So
oh, wait, that's the speaker one,
yes,
right?
this is a speaker.
Yeah.
So it's a
I
for
remember
those
you
of you
posted that, I
who do
think.
not know, this is one of those speakers that would come like in a greeting card where you open the
Oh,
card and
yeah.
it plays something. So
Yeah.
it's got a little soundboard attached to it. We can upload a MP3 or WAV file to play, and it's just triggered by this little button. And the power source is just a 5-volt wire out. So we can just plug a couple batteries into it, maybe even
That is
do that
awesome.
same thing where the battery is housed externally and we store the internals of the microphone inside the kit. I don't know if this is going to be a big enough kit to fit that soundboard in though. I mean, like I could
Hmm.
definitely find a place to stuff it
Oh,
in
yeah.
the O.
That back end.
Oh yeah, that wagon on the back, that's a speaker.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah, like I said, link down in the description to vote for what we are going to do with this bound dock once it is completed in its snap build.
Cool.
And before we get too far into these things that I've been learning lately, so over here on the screen share, I've got the thumbnail to a video that I made probably 2 years ago now, where I tried to make a silicone mold and cast Gunpla parts using melted runners. And no matter how many times I tried it, no matter how many different techniques, whether I injected it using a syringe, whether I stuffed it in there with my finger, I always ended up with a sort of pitted, damaged looking part. And of course, the comments section is just full of suggestions about what I did wrong. And it's only recently that I discovered exactly what happened because it wasn't that I was catching air bubbles in the mold itself. What was happening is, well, see, I've got this little piece of silicone that I can use as a rough example of what was going on. So let's pretend that this was a melted sprue, and I'm kind of playing with it like it's a little putty. What was happening is I was trapping air inside the part, and then as it dried, as it cured, those air bubbles would dissipate and it would cause the pitting that you would see in the surface. So it wasn't that there was an air bubble on the surface. What was happening is the air was trapped inside the part, and as the part cured, that air would decompress and it would pull the outside of the model in.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
now that said, oh, go ahead.
that's one of those things that, like, you know how sometimes you'll work on a project and give up because you can't really figure out what's wrong? That's one of those things, yeah, that would take time to really figure out.
Yeah.
That's
And I owe it to all of the YouTube that I've been watching lately about like resin
oh,
casting
cool.
and silicone molds and things like that. I'm like, I'm now understanding the science behind why I'm an idiot. Um,
That's good.
so yeah, like I said, I'm playing around with this little piece of silicone, this little silicone disc, and this is part of another thing that I've learned recently. So I'm, like I said, trying to start casting some 3D print models in silicone so that I can make resin copies of them later without having to occupy the 3D printer. It's just a much more efficient way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I've been running into this issue where the 3D print surface inhibits the cure of the silicone. And old me, before I was intelligent enough to do this, is I would just test the part by pouring a mold. But the part that I'm making is like, it's pretty big. It's about 4 by 7 inches. So that's a lot of silicone rubber to waste on a failed mold. So
Yeah.
I've learned to make small samples and just like dab a little bit of silicone on the 3D print to see if it would inhibit the curing. So this is actually just the leftover that was in the cup that I mixed, and I just dabbed a little bit onto the 3D print. As it turns out, despite washing it with alcohol and dish soap, still getting inhibit, like the silicone's not curing against the surface of the 3D print, but I've managed to save a lot of silicone rubber that I would have otherwise just poured on it and wasted.
Hmm.
So now that said, it's a hot day today, so I was able to go out and spray down my 3D print with some mold release and some, or well, not mold release, but like just a top coat to so that the silicone can cure against it.
Wow. That seems involved. Wait, and you were saying a hot day, so it's better to do that in the heat?
Well, at least around here, it's not as I
Okay.
don't think that we have as humid heat as you have
Oh,
down
okay.
south.
I see. I see.
But yeah, as you can see on the slab, we've got our Gundam 7th, and there's a few things that I learned about this guy after finishing the snap build. I'm sad to report that I am actually going to have to model the backpack because the backpack is asymmetrical. It's got this little part on it.
Oh.
Well, I'm gonna break the thrusters off apparently. It's got this little part on it that is used to mount the cannon, and you can't really do anything with that.
Hey, let me ask you real quick because I did that video with the RX line, and when I got to the 7th, like that drawing of it was so awesome.
Oh, I
But
know. Isn't that great artwork?
but I guess is that like is does this have a little bit more armor on it, or is this the same thing as that drawing? Just the
So,
proportions seem to be bigger on this.
yeah, I mean, this being the full armor version is a little chunkier,
Okay.
but yeah, there are some subtle differences, and we'll kind of look into that because there are sort of some choices that we're going to have to make when it comes to 3D printing the conversion kit from this full armor to the standard
Ah,
um,
okay.
Gundam 7th. Which again, it just fascinates me that these were the only two 0081 kits that we got were the full armor Gundam 7th and the what was it, the Ifrit Noct.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you mentioned that before. So that's what's neat because that other one is a cool look. I mean, but this is too.
Yeah,
But
I mean this is
to
pretty
have them
cool
both
looking,
would be
and
awesome.
unfortunately, we're not even going to be able to do that thing where we can like make you know armor parts to clip onto it where, we can convert between the two. Basically, a lot of these parts are going to have to be completely from scratch.
And
So for
that's
instance,
the other thing. Yeah, I noticed, like, the armor looks more like it's replacements rather than like a Chobam armor, for instance.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that that's one of the reasons that this is unlike, the Alex or what's another? Oh, so the Gundam Thunderbolt full armor kit.
Oh, yeah.
That one you
Yeah.
can purge the armor because basically it's just fitted on top, right?
What
This
about the
it's
double Zeta? The full armor double Zeta?
full armor double Zeta is another
Yeah.
good example. That one you can, kind of purge that outer armor shell. This is not like that. I mean, the
Yeah.
arm is cast with the full armor attachment on it. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to cast entirely new forearms. I think I mentioned before that because the shoulder armor has the ball joint that connects to the torso,
Mhm.
that you're going to have to cast this whole part anyway. We're not going to be able to do that. And I mean, there are some things that I could do, for instance, that if I were not making this as a production model, if I were just doing this for myself, we could get away with. So, for example, um, when it comes to the leg armor, one of the things that I noticed is these leg side armor plates are actually, what would you say, ambidextrous or agnostic of which side they're
Oh,
on.
I
So,
see
like,
what you're
for
saying.
instance, if I wanted to
Yeah.
make a non full armor version, I could just do that and make copies of these two parts and have them on both
Oh,
legs and remove that
interesting.
outer armor plate. But
Is that the only part of the kit that does that?
there are a few other parts that, like, kind of,
Oh.
you can kind of swap onto the other side.
Hmm.
But yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't, if I were to make this as a conversion kit available to other people, then I couldn't do that because, not everyone's going to have the resin casted parts of
Yeah.
the other sides of the leg. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, it
So
makes
that
me
means
think
that we're
of
going to have
buying
to cast
2.
the whole leg.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my local comic shop has it. It's a little pricier.
Oh, is it?
Uh, yeah, but, it's like I think of getting it, but I'm like, "Well, the price is high, but how else am I gonna get it?"
Right. Well, Leaping Panda, I'm sure might
Oh, that's right, one of those shops that sometimes you don't realize will have a cool, hard to find kit at a good price.
exactly. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think there's definitely ways to find it at the suggested MSRP of 20 US dollars.
Hey, let me ask you real quick, is that a free that is the kit, is that the one from, like, the 2nd or 3rd level that c completely, like, decimates you? Or
Yeah.
has decimated me? Okay.
So this is actually before you end up, that level on the moon where you have the heavy gear, or it's like
I
the
haven't got
heavy.
that far.
Oh,
That
yeah. Oh, shoot.
I'm at the Ifrit, and then I just stopped.
Well, and it's so funny because well, for those of you who don't know, Adam and I have played 0081 together, and that is a very difficult game, and the AI is not very helpful to you.
Yeah.
So one
Yeah,
of
the
the
co-op
things that
was fun.
what's
That
that?
that co-oping was fun,
Oh yeah, that's
on
one
it,
of the
yeah.
best co-op Gundam games I think ever. I mean, how many co-op Gundam games really are there?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, because I even played with Talos on the emulator, and it was just as fun playing some other levels that we didn't play, and yeah, that's a good one. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
they can revisit that.
So usually the way I operate when I play that game is because the AI is so trash, I'll usually give them the better mobile suits.
Yeah,
So like I'll
good
give,
idea.
Sherry the Gundam 7th, and then I'll use like I'll just use a GM, and then I'll give one of the G lines to what's the other pilot's name? The one with the big nose.
Ah,
I forget his name.
couldn't tell you.
But same deal when I'm playing for Xeon too. Is like if I'm playing as Eric Blanc, I'm using a Goof, and I give the Ifrit to one of the wingmen.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, yeah, hoping they know the meta.
No, they don't. They
Yeah,
just run
yeah,
around with the stupid wrist gatling.
that's cool.
Oh gosh. So what I have done here is I'll hop back into the screen share. I've got Blender open, and these
Ooh,
are the parts of the Gundam 7th in the scale that we're going to need to make. And
wow.
one of the cool things that I can do actually, and I might end up using this if I wanted to create some color separation options, is I actually did save the textures of. So
Wow.
we've got the colors, and so for instance, if I wanted to set it up to where we can print the chest plates apart from the rest of the chest, we can do that so that then they're easier to paint later.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it's a little harder to work with, you know, actually sculpting and doing that kind of stuff with all the textures on. So I am actually going to
Yeah.
turn those off.
Yeah,
Well,
it'd be nice to figure out a way to make it where, yeah, some of that can be color separated because I hate the little that Federation crest at the crotch. That's always the hardest thing for me to paint because the yellow, painting
oh,
yellow on the red.
it's so frustrating. And like,
Or I guess in this case though, you could choose a color that the resin prints in that would be better overall for what paint you're applying.
that's true. I mean, I could actually cast the part in yellow so that then you just dab the red
Yeah,
around so that you're not having to paint the.
that's
That
pretty
that
cool.
might actually be better than painting, or it'd be easier to paint the white than it would be to paint the yellow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But yeah, so we've got our backpack and everything. As always, when it comes to the stuff that I do in Blender, I have everything separated out onto their own layers so that we can hide sections of it. I've actually already started doing a little bit of the conversion work on this because we've got this little sphere here that is going to be, it is actually the exact diameter of our ball joint that is going to connect to
Wow.
the torso.
Did you use that micrometer for that?
Sure did.
Ah, nice.
Now,
I need to get one of
funny
those.
story about that though. What I've discovered is, and this is because I've been 3D printing those action bases. Um, so the action base requires a 7 millimeter peg hole in order to mount the actual mount of it onto the plate. But my 3D printer, at least with the resin that I'm using, it does kind of overprint a little bit. And so what ends up happening is, say if I make a 7 millimeter hole in Blender, what actually prints is more like a 6.8 millimeter hole.
Hmm.
So what I've been doing is adjusting things either up or down by 0.2 millimeters in order to account for that difference. So, and I think that that's a little easier than, you know, I could tinker with the print settings and see like
Right.
how much exposure, what lift height I need to use. But I've really gotten to a point where I'm enjoying the results of what I'm getting off of the printer using this particular resin and using these particular print settings of 7.5 seconds per layer. So for me, it's easier to account for the margin of error in the
Yeah.
model itself and then print it and just not have to worry about it than it would be to continually, I'm going to print,
Tweak it.
1,000
Yeah.
models that are 7 millimeters and see which one actually comes out 7 millimeters.
Yeah. Especially if you already have it dialed in for the overall print. You
Yeah.
don't want to mess with that. Yeah.
And I mean, that's not to say that obviously there are different solutions for everybody. You might be the type of person that
Oh,
prefers
yeah.
to work in strict measurements in your model, which, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So let's see. There's a few things that we need to do here. I did measure out the distance of the ball joint from the shoulder armor. So this is actually the exact distance away that it needs to be. But as you can see, it's not centered to the piece itself. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to select a couple of points in edit mode here. And we are going to grab the Y value, which is obviously, we're just going to copy that because I can't keep track of that many numbers. And then once we hop in here, we can actually go ahead and paste that Y value in, and it is
Mm,
lined up mathematically perfect.
that's cool.
So that's always the way to go. Whenever you can do something, using math and not just kind of eyeballing it.
Yeah, especially if you can copy and paste all the decimals afterwards. Yeah, that
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then now that we've actually done that, one of the things that I have been doing lately is, so in order to get the positioning and the scale and everything right, I joined this all up. But what we can do is we're going to come in here and separate this by loose parts. That's just going to make it a little easier for us to work with. Separate by loose parts. That's going to make it a little easier for us to work with because now I can select individual plates and move them around as I see fit, you know.
Yeah, very cool.
So really what we need to do is decide where we're going to put the sort of seam line of these, you know, it's got to be two halves, right? That get put together and
Oh,
it's going to be front and back. But some of the challenges that we're going to work with is like, you know, we've got this little circle here on one side that we don't want to cut that down the middle and then have to try and fit that together correctly, right?
yeah.
Let's see if I
So do you just make it where it's just one side, or do you make it where it almost has a it comes in across the top
now
and
you're
then
talking.
okay.
So yeah, what
You already knew that. You're just waiting for me to say something.
so I mean, we could make the seam line, you know, off-centered, but I'd like to keep most of it centered and then just have like this little cutout attached to one side or the other.
That's cool.
And I think that that's going to be the way to do it. Um, so the easy way I think to do that would probably be to just go into this object and we're going to select a few faces here. Oh, wait a second. Oh, okay, so the circle is actually not part of this part of the model. It's not the end of the world, but it's not what I was expecting. Wow, is that really not attached to it at all?
Oh,
Well,
okay, because you're trying to select everything, every
yeah, just trying to
face.
select everything on this side of the model, which it looks like the back plate is already its own part. Yeah.
Huh.
Okay. So
Wait.
maybe we don't have to do too much
Yeah.
with it at all.
Yeah, maybe it prints like that, then slap together. And are you and I actually I don't know if you answered this before, but are you building it to where you're gluing the parts together, or are there attachment pieces?
No, I'm actually going to try and build this so that, you know, it fits together with the existing mold.
Like the for instance, if the shoulder points or the shoulder parts were to join, they would, like, snap in place?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, cool. Very
It's a
cool.
little more work, but I think that
Yeah.
it's going to look a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
And there's some tips and tricks that I've learned recently that I'm going to share with you guys about how to do that because, you know, one of the sort of rookie mistakes when it comes to 3D printing is, you know, if you're printing two halves that are going to connect together, you end up doing this thing where it's like you have two flat planes that are gonna just basically press up against each other. But if you look at any like manufactured plastic object, let me see if I've got something handy. If you've got like a mouse or like a game controller or something, when you look at like the two halves of those devices that are put together, what you'll notice is on the seam line, you end up having this little sort of interior piece of plastic that fits underneath the other half of the.
Yeah. I've got this, little timer thing you can see at the top there
Yeah. So
because
that
that's
seam line,
yeah.
so that actually has an extra piece of plastic that tucks underneath the so it looks like it's butting up against each other, but if you were to take it apart, there's a little piece that fits underneath. And by
Yep.
doing that, what you can do is you can make it so that it always fits together perfectly and you're not going to get that sliding because it's snugly kind of contained. So
Yeah,
that's
that's a good point.
that's actually something that I'm going to do with this particular model is we're going to create like an inner lip on the on one half of each plate that goes underneath the other side. And so it's going to give you like a nice snug fit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Now,
interesting 'cause I think sometimes a model kit does that, but actually not all the time.
no, that's
Only
true.
only
It's
very specific instances does it have kind of that lip that it goes most of the time there's specific connector parts.
and typically you'll see it with the metallic coated kits
Oh, yeah,
because they try to
yeah,
hide the gate line.
that's right.
So then let's go ahead and join up all of these parts because it looks like those are going to be one half. And then we've got our back half here, which is going to consist of these parts. I think that that's everything. Oh, so now if I go to the pauldrons group, there should be, nope, I still have some parts that are not joined up. And actually, I'm going to have to do something with these because if you look, there's actually a slight gap in between.
Mm.
So those aren't going to print very friendly.
Oh.
And actually, come to think of it, what we are going to need to do is make sure that we have an appropriate gap in between to allow clearance for the arm joint.
Oh, yeah. And but are you and you're gonna make it like the same joint type pretty much? Because we saw that you had that ball peg in there.
Yeah, exactly. So we are going to need 11.2 millimeters of clearance um, between the two sides of the pauldron. So like, I think the best way to sort of test that physically would be to add a cube, and we're just going to
Mm.
make it 11.2 by 11.2 by 11.2. So I can already tell that this shoulder needs to be expanded a little bit in order to fit the actual arm joint.
Ah, okay. And what would you do? Just scale it all pretty much?
So I wouldn't want to scale this particular part just because it's already it's already at the scale that I want it to be at in order to match up with the existing part. So what we'll end up doing is just actually dropping the insides of, or like we'll expand the middle of the,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
I see.
And there are a number of ways you can do that. We can do a Boolean operation and just carve it out if we wanted to. Um, Although I'm kind of thinking that the best solution is going to be to do this. If we select this face and we get the Z value of it, and then we come back over here and we set this face's Z value to be equal to that. Now the downside is we can only do that with one face, right? Let's clear out some of these parts so that we can see what we're doing. So again, I could eyeball it and just take the whole side of that model and like shift it over, but I'm trying to think of a way that we can do this mathematically that's not
So
that
everything's all accurate to the
exactly.
dot. Yeah.
Well, we can do, let's something like this, which there is a snap tool in Blender that you can use to like snap things
Mm.
uh, to a face. And so then if I were to grab, so it like snapped the rotation to to the box. That's not exactly what we wanted. What I'd rather do is let's not snap. We'll do face but not rotation. And that way we can say grab and I don't like that it moved the location of the of the arm, but it is flat against the
Oh,
well, actually that does give me an idea. If we do that and then we take the location values from this object, we might be able to move it back where we wanted it, at least on the X plane
yeah.
and the Z plane. Yep, I think that's going to work.
Oh, nice.
And then what we can actually do is we can copy that Y value and we're just going to paste it on these parts that I didn't that I didn't select. Let's hide the cube for now.
Cool.
And then we can actually join these up because they are supposed to be connected.
This reminds me of editing in Premiere, but in 3D. Snapping, making
Yeah,
things get all selected.
it really is. I mean, there's, I guess there's so many editing principles that are kind of universal.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Oh, here we go. We got, oh, well, that's the inside part of it. Well, I suppose we can. So this is where it's going to be tricky is then if we've got some of these parts that are where we want them to be, do I then scale up the center and make it wide enough to fit?
Hmm.
Or would it then be easier to just carve out the center to
So
be the
that's
width?
interesting then. So how did you get the measurement of the shoulder in the
So
first place? Like,
yeah, I took the existing. Oh, so like how did I get the initial scale
yeah,
of it? So I compared the scale of the forearms since that's something that is the same no matter what, like whether it's the full arm or the standard. Once I had that measurement for the width, which is 9.2 millimeters, I actually punched in that value specifically to the forearms, scaled them
mm,
down to get the percentage, and then I took that percentage and then copy and pasted it across all of the other parts. Now,
mm,
that means that the actual size of this shoulder armor is the same size as this, but because this 3D model is a little bit thicker, it's
yeah.
not as thin on the inside where we need to actually have that arm connect.
Interesting. So I guess like for the official version, they would probably Bandai would probably be making some modifications for it to work. I guess because there isn't one.
Yeah,
So it's almost like you're making that up, pretty much,
pretty much.
right?
That's
Yeah, because there's no reference.
yeah, we don't have anything to kind of go off of besides, we just want it to fit with the existing model kit.
Yeah.
So, that said, what I think we can do is I don't want to completely cut out the center because we still need that top half to connect, right?
Hmm.
So what I'm going to do is just make this wide enough. This is where we can use some blender magic.
Yeah, and hello to those that just joined the chat.
Hey, yeah,
Steven
welcome,
is
welcome. Hope I'm not
making
boring you all with
a
this.
Gunpla.
It's just about as exciting as watching
Hey,
paint dry.
hey, it's a Blender tutorial for those that want to learn how to use Blender or behind the scenes on how Gunpla is made.
Yeah, there
Probably.
you go. Yeah, bootleg Gunpla. So I want to get the rough fit of this where I want it, because like I said, I don't want to clip out any of the center, but what we can do is we'll actually hide that cube, and then we can select this piece and add our Boolean modifier and just select the cube. And you can see it cuts away
Yeah.
exactly what we need. So that's kind of the quick and dirty method, but it is going to require some cleanup.
And I'm sure it would be impossible that your first print would be perfect anyway.
As
So you're
close as
gonna,
I would like to get it
yeah.
to.
Like, yeah, that's kind of the first pass, doing all the little changes you need to make and then print it. And then you might from there figure out another way.
Exactly. Yeah, because the other thing that we're going to need to do, and I've been trying to pop this shoulder apart because we need to figure out where to put the holes where we are going to put our poly caps, because this shoulder joint is actually held together by a poly cap. Fortunately, that's the only one that we have to worry about. We don't have to worry about putting in other peg holes.
Ah.
There we go. Oh no, that was just my fingernail. um, one of these days I will invest in a part separator. But
Yeah, I
do
think I
you have a
even
part
had
separator?
one and then just lost it because I didn't need it for a while. And then when I need it, I can't
Isn't
find it.
that always the way?
Yeah.
Ow. Ooh. Okay, I think we've got it at least far enough apart that I can. Oh, actually, so this is interesting. I didn't remember this from the snap build, but this kit actually has a similar cut the way that we're trying to design here in Blender. Let me switch back to the table. So as I separated it, you can see that because there's an attachment joint for this little piece that snaps on here, um, oh, so because, oh, let me fix the camera angle here. So like similar to the way that we are trying to cut around that circle on the shoulder, this has a cutaway where the joint is where that
Wow.
part connects. So it's very interesting that this, even the final model is asymmetrical.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
Now it looks like if we were to look at the hole where the shoulder connects, it's a standard polycap hole, but it is lined up perfectly with the sphere that connects to the ball joint that connects to the shoulder. So that means we don't have to, kind of fuss with the height of where we're going to put it, but we are going to have to make sure that we make the interior size of it the right size. So it's a 3 millimeter hole. Um, yeah, 3 millimeters. And then,
Cool.
of course, the outside walls of it is 4.5 millimeters. So what that means is if we hop back into Blender and we wanted to create those polycap holes like we were talking about, what we're going to do is we're just going to add a cylinder. And again, we'll do a 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. This is going to represent the walls of the hole for the polycap. And we'll probably change the depth of it, to be honest with you, because that's probably That's probably a much larger
Mm.
hole than we
Yeah.
need. But, I always like to just scale everything uniformly when we start out.
Mhm.
But like I mentioned, we already have the Y value that we need. So we are just going to basically copy the transform of the sphere that is the ball joint and paste that in for the cylinder.
Mm.
Um, X location, can copy that, paste it on our cylinder, and the Z location, we'll paste that in. So the only thing we really need to figure out is how far inside we need to move it, right?
Oh, yeah.
We are going to rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis so that, we've got it the way we need it. The best way, I think, to find out how far inward it needs to be is to just measure from the center of the ball joint to the center of the polycap hole, which 9.5. So what we can do is we'll take the X value of our ball joint, select our cylinder, paste that in, and add 9.5 to it. Or maybe plus 9.5. There it is.
Ah,
So that is precision placement right there, ladies and
that's
gentlemen.
crazy. I wouldn't even trust myself on that. That's too many numbers I typed.
And then what we can do is we're just going to copy and paste that cylinder exactly where it was. We are going to scale it to, this is where that little math fudgery
Mm.
that I mentioned comes in. We're actually going to make it 3.2 millimeters because, like I said, the way that my printer is working with this particular resin, I need that hole to be 0.2 millimeters larger in the 3D model than I want it to be printed. Otherwise, it's going to print too small and the polycap's not going to fit.
Okay.
Now, that said, oh, we are going to extend the z-axis of it. And then we can select our original cylinder, the 4.5 one. And let's go ahead and add a Boolean modifier to it. We're going to select the smaller cylinder. And there we go. We have our perfect polycap
Wow.
hole.
Amazing.
Then we just need to kind of mount it on the inside here. Now, of course, like I said, that Z depth is a little aggressive. We can actually reduce that and, just keep the size of the hole. That said, it would probably be prudent to
To
determine
measure.
exactly how far apart they need to be. Oh, you know what? I think the easiest way to do that would actually be to measure the polycap itself.
Oh.
So the width of the polycap without the pegs, so this would be with the pegs like submerged into their appropriate slot, is 4.7 millimeters. So let's go ahead and I'm trying to think of the best way to do this because we want it to be centered, right? So then if I were to copy and paste that, we need a polycap on either side and they need to be 4.7 millimeters apart, or in this case, 4.9. Well, oh, well, here, I have an idea. We will actually go into edit mode. We can select one of these faces, figure out what the Y depth is on it. We're going to copy that, tab out, and then we can actually set the Y value of this object to that. plus 4.9. And we actually need to add an extra little bit to account for the fact that it is 2 millimeters thick, so we need to add an extra millimeter to that. That is just so the difference there is that because I was taking the origin point from the outside of this cylinder, and then we're trying to apply that transform to the entirety of this other cylinder, you can actually see that the origin of the transform is in the middle. It's not like I'm snapping it to the edge. So in order to get the edge 4.9, I have to add that extra half of a.
Wow.
So these
Seems
are
like
those
so much
things,
work.
it's the little details.
Yeah.
um and then similar to, oh, you know what? We can probably even just copy the Y location of our ball joint. And if we select both of the, oh, we can't do it that way. Damn. I was hoping we could just snap it right to the middle, but we might just have to eyeball this, which is interesting
Mhm.
because that means that, like, these are pretty far from the edges of where we had to cut away.
Yeah. It's pretty weird.
Yeah. But I mean, it does make sense because if you think about it, so this is the part that goes over the polycap. Let me switch back into our table view here. So even though the polycap itself is 4.7 millimeters wide, the part that goes over the polycap when the build is complete is actually much larger. And it actually kind of engulfs the pegs. Oh, there we go.
Oh, wow, yeah, I see.
So then, like,
That
when that goes in here, it kind of wraps around those peg joints. So yeah, I mean, actually, if you think about it, let me pull that out here. So even if the polycap is not in there, this shoulder joint actually butts up against the pegs that hold the
yeah.
polycap in place.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Okay.
Yeah. So that makes a
Yeah,
lot.
that's not a super common, uh, shoulder configuration that I see in Gunpla.
No, no, it's very unique to this
Yeah.
particular kit. So, but see, these are the types of considerations that I think, it would be so easy to just create a bunch of, 3D printed parts that, you could just glue together
Mhm.
and make it work. But really the objective here that I'm trying to achieve is getting these parts to where they are as turnkey as possible and you can
Yeah.
just slap them on.
Yeah, yeah, it might be a lot of work at first, but it'll pay off,
Yeah.
with a really nice finished product.
That's my hope.
Yeah.
And again, these are things that I've learned, from lots of different 3D printed Gunpla applications.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would say is it definitely gives me a much more appreciation for the engineering. I think you and I have talked about this in the past, how you really appreciate the engineering of a mobile suit just from building the kit.
Yeah, that's right.
For
So
me, this, like, 3D modeling something that is designed to fit together with a Gunpla, it makes me appreciate the engineering of the Gunpla so much more.
yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes you kinda take for granted the way things go together.
Yeah.
Especially if you're sometimes doing it where you do the 2 pieces at once, so you're just kinda your own little factory where you're just, like, plugging in and everything, but, like, to really look at what they considered to put it together, to
Oh
take
yeah.
into account for articulation or armor, and that's why some are different than others. And again, I always say I need to make a video someday where I take the best of from what I've seen from high grade kits and like how they could, all the best of when it comes to joints.
Hey, look, that said, I'm gonna switch back to our large view here. Well, actually, I think it'd probably be easier to show this off on the table. So, having built most of our bound dock, I can tell you that this is one of the highest quality high grades I've ever built.
Wow.
Not just in terms of its engineering, but because of the variety of plastic used, the level of color
Oh,
separation. You know, they could have just made this a single yellow plate, but instead they have that cutaway there that shows the interior plastic color. You've
that's
got,
true.
this shoulder, shoot, if this were a Zaku, this would just be two pieces that are put together. But instead, each half is three pieces. So this is a six-piece shoulder joint, which is insane for a high grade.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've noticed that with some of the crazier designs where they tend to have a really good quality suit for them, where you think they would be like, well, with something this crazy, we kind of have to scale back on
Oh yeah.
how
Well, and it's
pieces
got
are.
rubber like
Oh,
the pipe
yeah.
effects are soft rubber, and the way that they fit together is so freaking well done. And one of the few high grades out there that comes with its own stand. It's got
Oh,
its own
that's
action
awesome.
base with it. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, I think that incredible kit. And so I might even have to just do a whole review video on the Bomb Dock because
Oh, you should, yeah.
because I appreciate the level of engineering that went into it.
It's one of the goofiest looking mobile suits.
It
I mean,
really is.
really. I need to get the kit as well.
And it only exists for like what, maybe 6 episodes?
Yeah, if that, yeah.
R.I.P. Jared. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done here, but this is most of what we need to do in order to make this work. Although I
Good.
can probably take this same cylinder that we used for the for the ball joint, and we can, or sorry, the poly cap, and then we can just actually slap that right onto the
Oh,
ball joint, and we
there you
have
go.
our connector.
Yeah, almost there, man. Ah, man, that seems like so much work.
Yeah, but like I said, it's worth it. Not only because I
Cool.
think that the finished product is going to be good, but I think it's worth it because again, it gives me an appreciation for this type of construction. And I'm not going
Yeah,
to sit here and call Bandai lazy for not building a kit that
I know,
I
right?
P Bandai's a bunch of scammers. It's like, can you imagine, you know, this level of sculpting? Now,
Yeah.
granted, it is a lot more difficult to craft these types of parts to fit with other existing parts. I think if
Mm.
I were just building this so that it was just a solid kit to build by itself, it would be a little easier because then I get to determine the joint size. I get to determine the placement.
Yeah, and
Um,
then think of how many times that they actually reuse parts on kits. So then if they're making a new kit, they're like, "Okay, let's yeah, formulate what we would reuse, what has the correct measurements." And yeah, that's
exactly. So I think before we sign off for today's stream. Hopefully I wasn't boring you guys too much with all of this 3D modeling stuff. Hopefully you guys find this kind of stuff interesting because
yeah.
I think that it's like I said, it really is something that I think people should try. Even if you're
Yeah.
even if you're not interested in doing this type of work, I think that it's worth trying it so that you can kind of like, again, just gain an appreciation for what is going into the products that you enjoy so much.
Yeah. And, not to think too far ahead in the future, but if in the future most homes are gonna be outfitted with some sort of fabrication machine, I do think a lot more like nowadays people, especially young people, are using phones and computers like crazy that older people can't. In the future, we're gonna be manipulating 3D programs to a degree where we can print at will anything we need for a household or whatever. I think some of this stuff is gonna be, like, used widely by a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely I like to think so.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, with the way that like photogrammetry is going to,
Oh,
like being
yeah.
able to scan in 3D parts using just a phone,
Yeah,
Um,
and then manipulating it from there to quickly get to where you want. Yeah.
exactly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the inside face of that part that we were talking about, and I'm just extruding and then scaling down by, like 0.95. And what that's doing is it's creating these interior faces. And the reason I'm doing that is because then I can select these interior faces, like we mentioned before, and
Oh,
make them fit inside of
that's
the
cool.
part that they're connecting to.
Dang. Pretty ingenious.
Yeah. So it's just extruding along the y-axis probably by negative 0.05. Maybe I'm on the wrong axis. Let's try the z. Hmm. Hmm. That is not what I was looking for.
Yeah, strange.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
So let's do 0.05. That's pretty small, actually.
That
So if
okay,
we do
that could
zero
be what
point 0.1,
a little bigger.
0.25.
Yeah.
See, I'm just trying to get it's like you don't want the lip to be super deep into the other part, but
Yeah.
you just want a little bit.
Yeah. No, I
I
think
think that
that
that's probably good enough.
yeah, amazing. That is cool.
And of course, now it's getting all chopped up by the box.
Wow.
But
Hmm?
we are just about out of time. So, yeah, I wish that I'd gotten a little further into this project, but you know how
I
it
don't
is.
know.
It's like,
That seems like quite a lot considering the math and on the fly engineering how the stuff is going to connect in the first place. It's impressive.
yeah, I did not go into this with any sort of plan. It's do I really look like the kind of guy with a plan? Um and it's it, this is part of the process too, is it's like you're kind of exploring it as you're doing it, because you come across these things, like stumbling across the fact that the polycap is smaller than the size of the joint that we need to create. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you adjust to solve those problems?
Yeah. No, that's I mean, someone's going to learn from this. I think people can reference this video if they are kind of looking at it. Plus, it's kind of the brainstorming or seeing how you're going, because it seems like there could be multiple ways to do some of that.
True. Yeah. And I
So,
think
yeah.
that, kind of offering that way of like, oh, well, how am I going to make this fit with the polycaps? It's like, well, look, I showed you a pretty quick and easy way using the Boolean modifier. You just, create a couple of cylinders, cut a hole in them, and boom, you've got a polycap joint.
Yep.
So, yeah. Again, I hope you guys enjoy this kind of peek behind the curtain. Hopefully, I will have this resin conversion kit printed out and ready to check out by next week. Because I think that if we do
Pretty
some
cool.
test fitting next week, that might be a fun
Yeah.
thing to do on the
That that
stream.
is find out what works or not. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, I scrapped the whole thing, threw it all out. It's all crap. But yeah, like I said, if you guys haven't, go check out Adam's video on the ensemble Nightingale, because
Yeah.
that is just an interesting line. If you're not into this
Yeah,
Gunpla
it is.
stuff, there's other Gundam collectibles that you can be investing in.
Yeah. No, I like that line a lot. Yeah.
And do you have any spoilers about what we might be talking about on the Gundam Explained show tomorrow?
No, but we will have a guest. It's actually gonna be Ashley, the Gundam Explained social media administrator. Yeah, she will be on, so
Very exciting. She's been doing
that'll
a
be fun.
wonderful job holding it down on Twitter, fighting off the trolls.
I know, and she had her interests she has an interest in Japanese culture of an area that I'm not familiar with, so we're gonna kinda dive more into that, so, yeah, that'll
I'm
be interesting.
excited. Yeah, that'll be a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Well,
Yep.
good deal. Then, yeah, we will see you guys tomorrow, 11 Central, noon Eastern.
Yep.
Until
Alright.
then, hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a good rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Cheers.
See you.